Good morning, I'm Mary Carmen. The purpose of this presentation is to expose my essay where I affirm that Mary Wollstonecraft has been relevant for contemporary feminism. First of all, I want to introduce Mary Wollstonecraft and some concepts which are very relevant to understand my conclusions. I will start giving you a definition of feminism. We can define feminism as a doctrine or social movement that asks for women the recognition of capacities and rights that traditionally had been reserved for men. We can situate the word of feminism at the period of enlightenment, where the principle of the principle of equality was mentioned for the first time, but women were excluded of it. In opposition of that, we can situate Mary Wollstonecraft in this context of opposition to the exclusion of women of the principle of equality. This author was considered one of the first feminists, and she wrote a vindication of the right of women. In this book, she did a reconsideration of the education of women in order to achieve capacity of self-determination. Okay. Next, I will give you a definition of what I understand as contemporary feminism. And I consider contemporary feminism this feminism that came out at the 60s, 70s, 1960s, 1970s. And we can aggregate it in two big groups that are liberal feminism and radical feminism. The liberal feminism, after the suffragist movement, wants to introduce women into the capitalist system and the relation of wage labor, and it demands for women the right of self-determination and equal opportunities as considered in capital system. And in the other hand, we have radical feminism that search of the root of patriarchal system and analysis power relations between men and women. And in this type of feminism is added intersectional feminism too, that analyze power relations between races, and it had more importance in United States with the Black movement. And after that, I will explain the arguments that I have to affirm that Mary Wollstonecraft have influenced contemporary feminisms. Wollstonecraft did a vindication of citizenships for women. It is accompanied with a demand for education, that it is important for liberal feminism. Since to achieve citizenship, they must have worthy of it. Consequently, they needed to be able to develop this reason and virtue. Wollstonecraft argues that reason and virtue must be equal for both sexes, that men and women have an equal right of choice, that both have the right to define their destiny. Consequently, the virtues of the good wife, the good women, the spiritual yoke to which women have been subjected, cannot be seen as natural as other authors, such as Rousseau, that it is situated in the context of the period of enlightenment, as Wollstonecraft had been argued. This is important into contemporary liberal feminism because it defends the equal opportunities of women and their capacity of self-determination. So it is important a new education that must be equal between men and women to in order to make capacity, in order to women be capacity of develop their reason and virtue to achieve self-determination. In opposition of the argues of Rousseau and other Enlightenment authors that defends that this difference of women and men it's natural, and because of that, men and women cannot have an equal education. Related with Rousseau and his arguments that the difference of women and men are natural. We can have an argument of Wollstonecraft that is very related to radical feminism. Wollstonecraft defends that women do not start from a perpetual ignorance. These affirmations have been imposed by men. Consequently, men have relegated women to a role of natural obedience for their husband or for men in general, and to natural maternal instinct, which remove them from the right to define their lives and destiny according as a rational subjects. This is closely related to the claims of radical feminists, which attempts to separate it in its feminist analysis the conception of gender and the attributes associated with it. Consequently, into social cultural aspects constructed around gender from the innate biological aspects of sex. In this case, Wollstonecraft will be exposing that the attributes of associated with women, such as their position of subordination to their husbands, are not natural attributes of their sex, but mere social constructions that had been attributed to the concept of female gender, which are far from being natural. So, as I said, this is important to radical feminism because, as I said before, it analyzes the power relation between men and women and searches the root of patriarchal domination. And one of these reasons, of the reasons of patriarchal domination, is this conception of authors like Rousseau that there is a natural subordination of women to men. Okay. And in order to establish a relation between Mary Wollstonecraft feminism and international feminism, is necessary to expose that it's inevitable that Wollstonecraft does not deal with feminism from an intersectional point of view. Since it is necessary to understand that the historical context of the author, in which there was no rule for this conception. However, as I have already explained above, this does not exclude that her arguments have not contributed in any way to a radical intersectional feminism. Okay, we can see this relation since Wollstonecraft reproduced the discourse of oppressed and oppressor, and it is even stronger in the case of racialized women, since women colonized by male imperialism suffer a double oppression, being woman and being racialized. We can apply Mary Wollstonecraft discourse in this case. Since the situation of this woman during the this woman referring to Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Wollstonecraft and women in the period of Enlightenment during the development of history is analogous to that. Women racialized for example, in the United States at 70s or 60s, who denounced during the Wollstonecraft denounced during the first French Revolution the exclusion of these women from the new democratic space that emerged after the abolition of the privileges of nobility. And it can be analogous to the situation of racialized women in the feminist movement at the 60s, 70s, after the consecution of the vote. So that we can conclude that Mary Wollstonecraft was relevant for contemporary feminism because of she has influenced contemporary feminism in that she began to define her later demands. Firstly, for the right to equal education and equal opportunities in order to achieve the economic independence advocated by liberalism feminism, and secondly, the primitive idea that gender and the attributes associated with it are a social construct and not a natural qualities of sex. And she argued that through education, women could be separated from what some authors, such as Rousseau, had defined as women's natural tendencies, such as the natural role of women to please men. In conclusion, Mary Wollstonecraft was more concerned with designing and defining the principles of feminism claims than with elaborating a detailed program of how society should change. It is what contemporary feminism did. And this development was carried by, as I said, by later contemporary feminism. Thank you for your attention.